So good evening, welcome to day 2 of British University's Rowing Championships and what should be episode 2 of this new experiment of what we're calling the Rowing Notebook, but which might actually be episode 1 because the first episode didn't upload, so I'm going to try introducing the whole idea all over again. So my name's David McNeil, I'm a rowing coach and I've been involved in rowing for far too many years now. And I've had the idea of shamelessly stealing the idea of Ted Kravitz from Formula One and his fantastic format of the Formula One Notebook, where he walks around the Formula One paddock in a very informal fashion at the end of qualifying, at the end of racing, and gives the view from trackside, the paddock, on what's been going on. And I thought, well, why don't we do that in the world of rowing as well? Because often it's the stories that emerge after racing which are the most interesting. Now, this experiment might have flying colours. It might be absolutely awful. Who knows? But I thought it was worth a go and we'll learn how to do it together. I'm sure you'll give me some feedback. Some of it will probably be abject abuse. Some of it might be remotely constructive. And the constructive stuff I'll try and turn into making this channel and this format of the Rowing Notebook even better. So the idea is to give you the chance, after a day's racing, like we've had here at British University's Championships at Home Pier Point, the chance to get in touch with the main themes of the day's racing. It's going to be impossible to analyse every single event from across the day. Can't mention every single crew, every single programme. But what I can do is use some of my experience, and I am rather old, to tease out some of the things that have actually happened and give you, dear viewer, the opportunity to maybe experience, relive a day's racing if you've not been here to enjoy it yourself. So, BUCS Day 2. An interesting affair. Very similar weather conditions to BUCS Day 1. And as I say, I'm not going to be able to talk about absolutely everything, but let me tease out some overall stuff that has gone on as I pass the medal podium where many a winner was crowned this afternoon. Similar weather conditions to last year, but overall races were a bit slower. Across the board, whether it be champ or intermediate or indeed beginner, times seem to be around about 5% slower compared to GMT. So, whilst we don't see any stonkingly fast times, nothing crazy, sort of big sub-6 times like we've traditionally seen in championship events, we have seen some good close racing nevertheless. To win championship, you needed to be getting in the mid to upper 80% today, and that was largely the same as yesterday. Fastest percentage of the day was championship 8s. So that was 89.9% in championship 8s, with the intermediate events around about 3% behind. And the closest gap of the day was in between intermediate and championship event standards was in the open 8s, where it was the delta of around about 2.5 seconds. Interestingly, the largest gap of the day was not in the event that I expected it to be in. I think many people expected the exceptionally large entry in women's quads, driven by the number of, the advent of a new event at Henley Royal Regatta for student intermediate quads. I think everybody expected to see women's intermediate quads and women's championship quads come closer together. That didn't happen. It was in fact the largest gap of the day between the two standards. But I've yet to get into the actual data, but looking at, I would say, the C finals and downwards in the women's intermediate quads, I think it's the mid to lower tier of that event which seemed to have been dragged up by the announcement of that new event at Henley Royal Regatta. So I think that's an interesting trend, and it's with women's quads that I'm going to begin the first analysis of racing as I try not to get run over by this chap in his car. And there's some weird flashing lights out in the middle. Like, anyone who knows what that big boy is, that boom is, let me know. but it's making a weird noise as well as flashing lights. Women's beginner quads, always an interesting event. I think across the board in women's quads, it was great. Whether it's women's beginner, women's intermediate, or women's championship, we saw some really interesting stuff. In the women's quads, it was women's beginner quads, it was a story of Edinburgh University Boat Club. What on earth is Mike Hughes, beginner's coach at Edinburgh, feeding his athletes? Because it's clearly working, right? And it's been working for a number of years. His program consistently churns out athletes who are not just physically capable of rowing to a high standard, but also technically far beyond their peers. And I think that was borne out in the story of beginner quads, where not only did they outperform in the time trial, they won their semi-final at Cantor, and then in the final, a real tour de force, technically and physically, to take the win in beginner in a time that would have put them in the C final of intermediate, where there are a lot more of experienced athletes, and arguably athletes with more horsepower. But that Edinburgh crew, that Edinburgh beginner crew, harnessed through whatever Mike's doing with them, delivering a really good job. So that's great to see. In the intermediate, massive entry. I think we had down to F finals in the end, and it was some of the best racing of the day. I think the F final basically all the finals had crews within touching distance of each other. There wasn't any examples of crews being spat out the back and miles off the pace. And I think that goes to underscore why we've perhaps seen that increase in competitiveness in the middle and lower tiers of that event, just because the races themselves are more competitive and you can get stuck in even if you're a little bit off the back. 7 finals, I think, all in. All of the finals, based on time trial results, were within 10 seconds of each other. So really quite competitive events, as I've said. And I think in the final was interesting. It was not, as perhaps everyone would have expected, Reading University, who are the traditional victors when it comes to crew sculling events, but it was a University of London crew which romped home to take the win. So great to see a different type of purple, because Reading row in purple as well, crossing the line in first place. Another standout was the fact that Oxford Brookes picked up 2 blades instead of just 1. And again, we are seeing stewards having invited people to come sculling at Henley Royal Regatta, and that invitation being taken up by programmes which have traditionally not been scullers, but have done well to get not just into the A final, but also to a medal. So well done, Oxford Brookes, in women's intermediate quads. As I said, not a massive step on in time. Actually, it was slower than last year, and quite a bit slower than last year in the final. But we're seeing that middle tier being dragged on. 5.2% behind the championship event, that being the largest gap of the day, as I said in the introduction. So really competitive mid-tier, not super fast at the top end yet, but I suspect that's going to come. So in terms of interesting themes in student rowing, look at that from day one. Women's Championship quads, perhaps a little bit more predictably, was the University of Reading show. A really good final. Hey Amelia, how are you?
I'm good, David. How are you?
I'm very well. How's the University of Leeds doing today?
University of Leeds is doing great.
Excellent stuff. University of Leeds happy with their results, and it's good to see. Amelia's a little bit hoarse there, so maybe you've been cheering people on furiously from the sidelines. But if you do see me wandering around with this camera, come and say hello, because the whole idea of this is that it is something which I get to talk about, but you get to input to as well. Back to my notes. Yeah, so with Reading really taking the win there. I wouldn't say there's any massive stories to bear in mind from that. because it largely follows the form book. Rowing isn't always glamorous and luxurious. They also pump out the portaloos. So I'm going to walk past that nice and quickly so you can hear me, and hopefully they won't start up the pump again while I'm doing that. Single events today. We had open events, an intermediate and championship. The open intermediate single was very nearly a Reading lockout. But the lone, not the lone sculler because he is at Reading. From a personal perspective, I absolutely loved to see Ben Howard of Star Club last year, now rowing at the University of Reading in his first year as a senior, taking the win in a competitive final. Ben had a good year last year during long distance trials. Ben, however, he had a tough time, I think, to be fair to say, during the seat racing side of things. So I was really glad to see that athlete, who has a massive amount of potential, come good in the single this year. He's clearly done a lot of work, clearly flourishing under Chris Bartley and the others at Reading University. So to take that win was great to see, and looking forward to seeing him continue to do more good things. Some scullers of absence though, while we are recognising the fact that Ben had a great one. A number of the PDA athletes who we traditionally see at the top end of intermediate singles were missing. So the likes of Lunn, Nottingham last year, now at Plymouth, Frodenberg from Bath, Coates, who was at Hartpury, Repton, who was at Hartpury, now at University. They were not racing. I believe Dom Hartley is injured at the moment, but the question there remains, what would have happened with those field of fit scullers? And let's see if the PDA athletes might come together for the main season and try and make an attack on, say, Prince of Wales or another event. Right, open intermediate eights. For me, it is one of the most exciting events to watch at the British Universities Championships, because you have everything at one end of the spectrum. Traditionally, Oxford Brookes romp home and do very well, and they did that again today with a clean sweep in the final of a 1-2-3. But you've then got incredibly well-resourced programmes like that, and far less well-resourced programmes like this crew behind me from the University of Leeds, who I believe romped home in... Charlie Drew, what final were you in the end?
E-final, came third.
E-final, coming home.
Live series?
Yeah, you're live. Charlie Drew, do you want to be the first interviewee?
Sure.
So Charlie, I'm just talking about why it's so good in intermediate eights that you've got the likes of Leeds University, who, let's face it, you don't have buckets loads of MPAC telemetry coaching.
Yeah.
But you can go toe to toe next to the likes of Brookes in the same event. So E-final, what next?
Yeah. An okay start, probably in the back half, and then I think it was good. We built through a little drop off towards the middle, and then Cox called it back on, got it back on, and I think really built towards the end. Good finish. Ended up third, 0.7 seconds off second, but well done Exeter, and I think maybe it was Jesus who were next to us. I can't remember.
You beat Jesus today. You beat Jesus.
Yeah, we beat Jesus.
You beat Jesus.
We walked through them.
Well, Charlie Drew, go home and tell your mummy that you beat Jesus today, and she'll be very, very happy that you did that. No, seriously, really well done to see, and it's good to see challenger programs like that doing well at events, and that's why I think intermediate eights is an important... Say again? You will... Well, you can come back on the notebook. You can be the visiting pundit. Right, excellent. So if you want to be a visiting pundit, come and let me know. Really important event, because programs can aspire in intermediate eights, whether it be championship or whether it be open or women's, and you can stay in touch with those crews that are often at the top end of the Temple. Speaking of the Temple Challenge Cup, that's where many of these crews are trying to qualify. They want to frantically get into the main draw for Henley Royal Regatta. You see every year Friday qualifiers. The number of qualifiers will be like 114, and there'll be 7 or 12 or something like that get through from Many universities, not just in the UK but abroad, who want to come and challenge themselves for that event. And if you can get into the C final at BUCS, if you can fight your way in there, then you're in largely a position to potentially find yourself in the main draw for Henley Royal Regatta. And for lots of these programmes, that means an enormous amount. And for that reason, I absolutely love watching it. So what are the main stories? Well, BUCS bag loads of aggression and doing what they tend to do best. They stick it in at the front end. They hold on to the footplate as long as possible. Very different to the other powerhouse in this event this year, which was Durham. Far less longer, arguably more eloquent or elegant in their style, but much less direct. So I think a similar story to what we saw in the Coxless Fours yesterday, where that top end speed from BUCS really shone through. So I'm going to be interested to see what the coaches from those two programs go away and do after this event. I know Will Fletcher will be looking for every bit of speed he can generate from the Durham crew. That directness was a big difference between the two programs, but Durham definitely looking like the longer and more elegant crew. Brilliant to see Exeter in the A final, another big step on for that program, who have been developing good crews for a number of years, from again a largely under-resourced program, certainly in comparison to the peers they have to operate with, but they did very well to get into the A final and give a strong account of themselves. Whether they can continue that momentum remains to be seen, but I, for one, certainly hope so. Other stuff of note, Bath, second in the B final. Bath, not normally a programme you associate with fast eights or the top end of intermediate events, but they're putting themselves up there. Typically, they've been associated with the co-located Performance Development Academy and therefore the focus on sculling, but they have generated some pace clearly in that B final to be the 8th ranked crew overall. Edinburgh, in the meantime, I've got a lot of time for Edinburgh. I've just been singing the virtues of the beginner quad that the women put out today. But their men's programme doesn't this year appear to be where it has been in recent years. They certainly haven't attracted as many into the programme as perhaps they have in the past. And certainly the results that I think we've seen through the winter continued today, with Edinburgh sitting at 5th in the B final. And that's not a position that I know that Coach Dale will have wanted to see his crew in. It's certainly not where that programme aspires to be. So let's see what happens between now and Met in a few weeks' time, and what they begin to start to focus on. Traditionally in the last few years, they've found that their Coxed Four offers them more opportunity, and they've gone down the route of the Prince of Wales. Maybe we'll see them do that again. Who knows? But one to watch. If you were around the course today, you've probably heard me harping on about Sheffield and how good it is to see their programme develop. They are up on Damflask Reservoir. They made it to the C final today. They finished 3rd in the C final today. And that's 2 years on the bounce that they've been in that final. They qualified for Henley Royal Regatta last year. I think it's the first time that their university has ever managed to do that. So it is really encouraging to see them being able to do that for a second year on the bounce. And they also managed to have a beginner Coxed Four in the open category get bronze in Coxed Fours. So healthy things starting to happen up at Damflask Reservoir, despite the fact that they share pretty much all their kit with City of Sheffield Rowing Club. There's one launch between the lot of them. So I think really interesting. But a 6:01 winning time, which is 11 seconds behind where it was last year. Overall, BUCS this year is slower, but still, not breaking 6 minutes in intermediate eights. That definitely was a surprise to me. And then we'll quickly talk about championship eights. Again, Edinburgh in the B final. They were behind Imperial. BUCS went to win the championship event, championship eight events with a strong showing. Durham strong and long. But I think what was very interesting was the fact that Bristol continued to hold their early season, their head season form by beating Newcastle yet again, having beaten them at the BUCS Head, having beaten them at the Eights Head of the River Race. They did so again today by taking fourth in the final. So great to see that from that programme. Another programme, while it is funded by the university, it's certainly not funded to the extent that others do. And on funding, we aren't seeing Newcastle churn out the men's crews, which we have seen them do in previous years. They still have the same talented coaching team, but I think the big difference, and if the towpath rumours are to be believed, the big difference is the support that it's getting from the university. We see this in many university sports at the moment. Universities in general are not as flush with cash as they would like to be, and are therefore reducing the funding for what they see as non-core activities. Rowing being one of them, it seems, at the University of Newcastle, and I understand that they were even considering at one point selling off the land at Newburn, where the boathouse for Newcastle University is. I'm assuming for houses or something like that. That would have been a travesty, and obviously the very popular and ever-present alumni network, the Blue Star, were on hand to intervene, which is great to see. But hopefully Newcastle University Boat Club and the Blue Star can find a way to sustain the success, regain the success that they've had in previous years, because it is a programme that has generated significant talent for GB, and it is a programme which we rely on providing stonkingly good eights to batter down the course here at the British Universities and Henley Royal and other regattas through the year. So a strong Newcastle helps strong rowing across the UK, and we want to see it. But I do want to pose the question, what does it mean for the commercial model of rowing in this country? As a little van comes down this way, and I'm going to try and move away because it's towing lots of clunky bins behind it. We need to have an honest conversation about the commercial model of rowing in this country. I'm just going to pop up between these two tents. Yeah, so we need to have an honest conversation about the commercial model of rowing in this country. Why do we need to do that? Because many of our clubs, unless you're one of the big ones, and I include universities in this, are living hand to mouth, and it doesn't feel like it's sustainable. In America, they've got a vastly different commercial model, and that comes down from the national governing bodies and the sponsorship and just the money they're able to monetize the sport in a way that we don't do in the UK. And I think about the Netherlands, and my understanding there is it's all about the alumni network and how much they support clubs in a way that we don't do or can't do here, maybe because the cost of living is so high, and once people leave uni they're all skint. I don't know what the answer is, but I think the question needs asked because we're looking around here and it's a huge regatta. So on the face of it, it's super healthy. We see great results coming at the World Under-23s. We see great results coming at World Championships, World Universities, etc., etc., etc. But that only happens, and it takes a very small difference for that advantage to evaporate. So it's events like this where I believe that we need to continue to make sure that we've got a successful model to ensure that success at the top end can continue, because it is not a given. Right, that covers the main themes for the day. So big winners of the day, women's crew boat sculling, great to see. And I hope that trend continues. Losers of the day, well, anybody who doesn't like watching racing, because the racing's been excellent. It's been a good event, and we've got another day to look forward to tomorrow. Things that are, I think, going to pan out tomorrow. We had Championship Women's Fours on Friday, but we didn't have the University of London. And UL were, through the winter, the form club when it comes to student women's sweep. So my question there is going to be, what happens to the the sweep events tomorrow, where we have championship and intermediate events for women when the University of London rock up. We've then got some intermediate events in sculling in doubles for the Open, and that's traditionally a really good bellwether to see how well crews, or scullers rather, from PDAs are transitioning as they go through the level of experience. Usually they spend their first year in the beginner events. Question is, how well can they break out and translate that speed into intermediate and beyond? So I'm going to be looking at those events and looking forward to seeing who can do what. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Comment below, give me some feedback, help me make it better for tomorrow, either by telling me what to do, by giving me some useful information, or by maybe invite me along to your trailer. Tomorrow we can have a chat about your club. You can tell us what was going on. I think that's enough. So some crews are out there now having a pre-paddle ahead of tomorrow, and I'll leave you with a tranquil view across Home Pier Point Boat Park.